If you care about faith, family, and freedom, listen up. I'm proud to partner with AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. While AARP pushes a woke agenda, AMAC is fighting for Social Security, election integrity, and to make the Trump tax cuts permanent. And right now, they're offering a 5-year membership for just $31. That's 47% off. You'll get discounts, benefits, and the AMAC magazine packed with conservative insight. Go to amac.us/Kirk and join the movement. Do it today. News is moving so quickly. It is moving at such an accelerated pace right now that it is difficult to keep up. It is moving so quick, we have to basically have 5 different chats open of different responses from foreign nations regarding tariff threats, regarding reciprocity. So there is a lot going on here, but instead of going into all the details, because that's just going to change by every 5 minutes, I think we need to take a step back and reset the foundational framework, to reset a 30,000-foot view of exactly what's going on here. President Donald Trump has been railing against bad trade deals for the last 30 or 40 years. President Donald Trump, as a businessman, identified trade deficits. And the way trade is supposed to be constituted is we do what we do best and you do what you do best, and we will barter. By doing so, you will make us wealthier, and we will trade, and we will both be able to have a flourishing future. What ended up happening in the 1990s and early 2000s, in the 1990s, there were 3 critical mistakes made by Bill Clinton. The entrance of China into the World Trade Organization, the NAFTA, and also the repeal of the idea of investment bank and commercial banks. That's a whole separate issue for another time. But the conflation of investment and commercial banks allowed the cheap flow of money to go into the capital markets in a way that specific deregulation, I think, actually led us to the 2008 financial crisis and the lords of easy money leading us closer and closer to fiscal and financial apocalypse. Now, free trade did make the stock market go up. Nobody is doubting that. Unlimited, unfettered free trade did make the 10% do very well. I am part of the 10%. I can say this as somebody who is part of the evil 10% of the country. When you are on the upper part of the socioeconomic ladder, specifically, if you do work that does not involve your hands, but only involves your brain, that does not involve your body, but only involves your brain, free trade is traditionally a great idea because we became an information economy and a consumer economy and not an industrial one. We thought because we were entering into a technological revolution, because that we were entering into a brave new world of unfettered, unapologetic free trade, that we would no longer need to make stuff. In fact, that is what the third world does. The idea was that the third world will make our products for us and that we will be able to become wealthier. Francis Fukuyama famously wrote a book called The End of History. The assumption was permanent U.S. dominance. It was a post-Cold War mentality. It was that neoliberalism is the end of history. Fukuyama wrote in The End of History that this will be the end of war, that neoliberalism was the apex of civilization. Neoliberalism was, of course, invade the world, invite the world. The idea of the Western liberal order will be able to be spread to all corners of the world, and we will end the eschaton. The eschaton, of course, is a Christian view of when Christ rules earth for 1,000-year reign. Immanentizing the eschaton is what the free traders thought they were going to get. In fact, I remember growing up, I was in 6th grade at MacArthur Middle School, right there on Palatine Road, right where I grew up. And I remember we would watch, they had these morning news bits. I forgot the name of it. Maybe Blake would know. It was like 5 to 10 minutes long. It was like mandatory must runs. I remember one of them. I'll think of it. I bet I could find it in a break. Anyway, it was the news clips. In one of them, they said, can you find a single thing when you're walking through a parking lot at Walmart and ask people what they bought that was made in America? And the answer was no. And of course, all my 6th grade classmates were like, that's wrong, that's wrong. And I remember the teacher would interject, and I wouldn't even say the teacher was liberal, the teacher was neoliberal. And the teacher would interject and say, no, this is a good thing. This made us wealthier. We don't have to do that work. We are liberated. In fact, what we were told, what I was told growing up, is that free trade would then make it where the Russians will be wearing Levi jeans, eating McDonald's, taking selfies, at the time, just listening to iPods. And it's not even that it's a bad thing for other things to be made in other countries. Of course not. We want a competition. We want markets. We do not want no trade. Instead, it is when nothing is made in America, or next to nothing, when it's such a small percentage. When making something in America, almost people look differently at you. Why would you do that? Now, we also must be fair. We have to be fair in our analysis, partially, but not mainly, partially as to why the corporate class decided to move these jobs overseas is that unions got very greedy in the 1970s and 1980s. This is a lesser appreciated component of this analysis, is unions thought that they were too big for their bridges. They were like, what are you going to leave? Literally, some of the labor unions would look at the corporate class and say, we want a 40% increase in wages, we want more days off. And the corporate class decided to get back at the unions. America became less competitive. Now, again, a lot of the Trump coalition is union labor. However, as Blake astutely pointed out, find one part of the American economy that is mass unionized that isn't totally awful. It's really hard to find. In the fact where mass unionization, especially public sector unionization, public sector teacher unions, public sector janitorial unions, public sector government unions, I think that there's a place, for example, a carpenters union. They're very good at training. They're very good at apprenticeship. However, there needs to be a balance between capital and labor. And what happened, of course, is the capital, the corporate class, having no allegiance to the United States of America, and the fact that unions overreached and unions got cocky, they looked at the corporate class in the eye and said, we're American labor. What, are you going to really go and make that trinket in China? And the McKinsey type said, yep, that's exactly what we're going to do, actually. And it was made easier by this decision. Understand what President Donald Trump is doing is fixing and remedying the mistakes of past. If you had to go look at what is the original sin as to why we are in the place that we are in, there are many places, there are many decisions. But the one where we actually have it on tape, rarely do you have the original sin on tape. And it was televised on C-SPAN. And that is when we decided to make what was then a third world and maybe a second world country to have entrance into the World Trade Organization. This was a glide path. We did not do this to try and make us have greater harmony with China. In fact, you could make an argument that our relations with China were probably better before China went into the World Trade Organization. The free trade zealots told us that trade will bring us peace. In fact, it turns out that mass trade with China brought us closer and closer to conflict. President Donald Trump is fixing this problem from Bill Clinton. Play cut 121.
The WTO agreement will move China in the right direction. It will advance the goals America has worked for in China for the past 3 decades. And, of course, it will advance our own economic interests. Economically, this agreement is the equivalent of a one-way street. It requires China to open its markets with a fifth of the world's population, potentially the biggest markets in the world, to both our products and services in unprecedented new ways. All we do is to agree to maintain the present access which China enjoys. Chinese tariffs from telecommunications products to automobiles to agriculture will fall by half or more over just 5 years. For the first time, our companies will be able to sell and distribute products in China made by workers here in America without being forced to relocate manufacturing to China, sell through the Chinese government, or transfer valuable technology. For the first time, we'll be able to export products without exporting jobs.
Boy, there was so much wrong with that. I'll analyze that after the break. You look at that. There's still joint technology transfers. We are not allowed to sell our products in China. Our technology companies are not allowed to sell in the interior of China. This is one of the reasons why President Trump's approval rating is gone up. President Trump's daily tracker of approval rating went up last week after the application of tariffs. It's so fascinating to me. I feel as if I live in two different realities. And I say this, by the way, as someone who is very invested in the stock market. Now, thankfully, I have a great person and team that helps manage that stuff. I was only down a couple percent. Well, a lot of other people were down a lot more. You could, have hedges, buy the VIX. You can have buffers, all that stuff. But I feel as if I live in two different realities. I was walking around Arizona, a certain part of Phoenix, Arizona this weekend, and a very wealthy guy came up and he was very worried. He came up to me, Charlie, what does Trump think with these tariffs? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? I said, look, everything I'm going to tell you privately, I also say publicly. I have no inside information. And if I did, I certainly wouldn't just share it with you. Very worried. He said, my portfolio's down, my market's down, so on and so forth. Okay. Kind of almost freaking out. And then in the other's reality, when I went out to dinner with my wife, a guy comes up to me and he says, Charlie, I'm a welder. This is the greatest week I've ever seen in politics. I said, what do you mean? He said, finally, someone is giving the middle finger to the corporate class, and they're going to defend those of us that work for a living. Us blue-collar workers have a fighter in the White House, and we've been waiting for it. Now, I'm not even saying one is right and one is wrong. They both are very valued constituencies. One is the capital class, and one is the labor. And properly understood and properly balanced, you have hopefully some brokered equilibrium between capital and labor. Understand the top 10%, which I am part of and many of the audience are part of, own about 88% of the equities. Now, it's a little deceiving because a lot of teachers and a lot of janitors and a lot of people that have 401ks, they might get blended into a major wealth management fund. Nobody is happy with what's going on with the stock market. But again, 10% of Americans own 88% of equities. The next 40% own 12% of the stock market. And the bottom 50% has debt. They have credit card bills, they rent their homes, and they have auto loans. And they've been screaming and crying for some relief. What's even worse is if Trump didn't do anything about this. And I'm not even talking about economically, because this is a risk. This is a gamble. We must be honest with this is an economic gamble. There is a risk associated with it. I think it's going to work out. I trust Stephen Miller, and I trust Susie Wiles, and I trust Scott Bessent, and I trust J.D. Vance. And of course, most importantly, I trust President Trump. But there is a risk. There is a gamble involved in all of this. But the greater risk would be if you run on tariffs and you don't apply them. That would be the end of democracy as we know it. That means you could pander to a constituency endlessly to just go get their votes, and you don't do it. That, to be perfectly honest with you, is far more horrifying and terrifying to the health of our politics than the stock market going down. And I know the stock market right now going down is hurting a lot of people. And look, this could go terribly wrong. Europe and China are going to be the main countries that will most likely escalate. There could be a de-dollarization. A lot of our wealth in this country is built on the fact that we are the world's reserve currency. So this is a high wire. This is a live wire act, one that I support. But markets knew this was coming, and Trump gave plenty of notice, and still we are seeing a sell-off. But I think back to that blue-collar guy that came up to me. Said, this is the best week of politics I've ever seen. And the contrast, the people that own in the market think this is terrible. The people that have built the country think this is wonderful. I would like to have them both think something is wonderful. However, if you look at the last 5 years, Wall Street has done very, very well. Main Street has not done very well the last 5 years. Been crushed by inflation, being crushed by consumer debt. They don't own homes. And they have been screaming at their politicians, please listen to us. Please do something for us. And that is what Donald Trump embodied, which is why, regardless of what Trump said or how they attacked him, the working class continued to rise up in record numbers. And now President Trump is delivering it. He is the promise keeper president. We've seen that on the border. The idea of these tariffs is to smoke out behavior targeted at American exports. And some of it is direct tariffs, but it's not only that. There's a lot of howling going on right now, and some of it is understandable. A lot of countries got used to the existing system. Well, Trump is starting our 1,000-mile journey with a great big leap. But most importantly is he's fulfilling the promises that he made. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for watching. First and foremost, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell. It really helps us out, and we love it when you leave comments. Share these videos with your friends. Also, get involved with Turning Point USA at tpusa.com. We have our Student Action Summit coming up this summer. We have our Young Women's Leadership Summit. All of the biggest and most amazing events of the summer at tpusa.com. That is tpusa.com. Again, hit subscribe, hit the bell. Thanks for watching.